Preface to The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Preface. Of late years, my enemies have driven me to conclude that fixed truths are stumbling blocks to the consummation of established usages and modernized human life. Whenever I have advertised a lecture, sermon, book, or apparatus of a useful scientific character, I have had only a few patrons. But when I made an impression by my advertisements that I was going into the veriest mysteries of human nature, was going to teach the public how to enjoy the feeling propensities without danger of exposition, was going to shake the devil by his horns and knock particular thunder out of ordinary things, I have always had an abundance of customers. Therefore, I have drawn a heavy picture in the novel before us. And whilst all phases of humanity are portrayed, I think I have not overstepped the modesty of nature, nor left anything undone to satiate all classes of people. Whilst sensation, history, comedy, and tragedy loom up truthfully, and I hope to the satisfaction of all who admire either devil or nature and nature's God. To furnish the reader with a diet that is palatable to his omnivorous taste, and yet to smother the most unpalatable though healthful dishes by his favorite hash, is the aim of this novel. By doing so, I am persuaded that the reader may learn, sooner or later, that the viand which was most distasteful was after all the most needful and desirable, and then he will distinguish truth from error, or a natural from an unnatural life. This done, and the masses will return to truth, nature, sound sense, and solid logic. I have also dramatized this novel, and I hope and pray that my labors have not been in vain, but I trust that millions may be saved from all sorts of misery through this feeble effort to entertain and instruct the people. The Author. End of preface. Chapter 1 of The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 1. The Hero Rescues the Heroine. In one of the oldest settlements of Pennsylvania, where nature has developed many curious phenomena and where beautiful mountains, hills, groves, and valleys abound, was born in an humble Christian family a son whose goodness, greatness, and peculiar power amongst men were Herculean. This humble but heroic son of toil was an outgrowth, as will be seen from the indomitable passions, love, and barbarous cruelty which he possessed. His parents were uneducated, though sincerely pious, orthodox, religious people who did not believe in education, therefore opposed schooling, deeming hard physical labor and devotion to gaining an honest living the extent of their zeal and ambition. However, the hero of our plot could not and would not see things in this light, but he saw a mirror in nature which overshadowed the valley of life and death, and he concluded to go through life in a natural manner, enjoying all the God-ordained manifestations and blessings, or fight like an indomitable fiend to win the victory or die the death of a martyr. Victor Juno was a God-loving youth, an admirer of the beautiful, the natural, a lover of the fair sex, an admirer of pristine loveliness, and an adorer of handsome babies. He beheld in his mind's eye, whilst quite a youth, what very few people ever see during a lifetime, namely, that all the world is a stage, and all the men, women, and children simply actors, who play a farce, tragedy, or Cupid's melodrama. He was a worshipper of the latter, because he looked upon a normal or godly human life as being a boon that should vouchsafe unto man one continual round of pleasures, joys, and delights, hooped together by a living love for the immutable Creator and his creatures, Adams and Eves in Eden gladness, surrounded by angels and baptized with talismanic darts of celestial love. To him such a world and such a life was worth living and dying for, and he despised the rational creatures who could not aid in the advancement of this soul-enchanting and body-beautifying cause. In his childhood he sought, by day and by night, the means whereby the hallowed ends which he beheld in the mirror of nature could be attained. Bred and reared amongst the illiterate and uncouth, with no opportunity to obtain a necessarily liberal book education, he strove to obtain from nature what others sought in collegiate tuition. And whilst he meditated almost continually over the wonderful works of the Creator, he became the more enamored with the bountiful goodness of the beneficent Most High, and beheld in the normal Elysium of nature the mirror which radiantly illumined the soul with effulgent joy and delight. To the high blue firmament he vowed to live a pure and healthy life, eschewing all useless and injurious habits, and as long as God gave him breath, he should not cease to promulgate and agitate the fundamental principles upon which humanity must depend for succor and salvation. Moved by intuition instead of man's tuition, he grew up to manhood, and whilst having been thrown among his fellows who did not comprehend nor esteem his Cupid God, he saw that his Elysium of nature was beneath par, and that his life most surely should not be the one which he saw unfolded to his senses in early childhood, as the design of the unchangeable Creator was being marred, and all living human creatures were acting a farce or tragedy, whereby they laid traps to catch each other, fearing that being too natural and generous they might become too happy, and thereby lose the boon of salvation. One day, as our hero was seated by the roadside of the celebrated Wissahickon, suddenly a two-horse equipage was driven along, and when the horses took fright, ran up an embankment and upset the magnificent coach. Quick as lightning, Victor Juno appeared upon the spot, when he found one horse lying flat on his side and kicking with fury, while the other beast stood trembling with fright. The coachman was lying about 6 feet aside of the coach, and all that he saw was an old grey-bearded sire's face, who was entangled somehow under the upturned equipage. The moment he saw Victor, he cried vehemently, "Young man, for God's sake, save my daughter!" Victor Juno, being very courageous, at once began cutting the harness away from the horses, but how to undo the traces of the kicking horse without help from anyone was more than mortal strength and ingenuity of one man could accomplish. However, he soon contrived to so entangle the kicking horse in the lines that one foot was fastened, when he vigorously grasped the other foot in his Herculean hand and held it whilst he leaned over and cut the traces. But just as he did so, the horse sprang to his feet, and throwing the hero about 20 feet vigorously against a fence, fractured his arm and scarified his handsome face severely. The horses ran furiously away. Victor sprang back to the coach, and with the strength of a giant rolled the equipage aside, which relieved the sire. But, oh horror, there was the most gloriously beautiful daughter, from whom the sire prayed for a safe deliverance, dead to all appearances. Quickly Victor Juno raised her to his arms, and being a physician, took a small vial from his pocket, and placed to her lips a few drops of unfermented vegetable liquid, which immediately caused slight signs of life. "Sire," cried Victor Juno, "shall I take the liberty to do my utmost, I am a physician, to restore your daughter?" $10,000 and an everlasting indebtedness to you, sir, for her restoration," responded the old gentleman. "I'll save her without dollars or indebtedness, or I am not a normal naturalist," ejaculated Victor Juno. The hero now speedily removes the jewels, satins, and silks from her swan-like neck and Venus chest, and applies his powerfully magnetic hand upon the nape of the neck, and, centering his giant will into his fingers, sends messengers of grace to the nervous centers of the prostrate form of the loveliest of her kind. And in a moment Miss Lucinda Armington opened her eyes, and gave a benignant look into the fiery and heaven-inspired eyes of our hero. And thus the life of the one became the joy and resurrection of the other. Victor Juno was, however, considerably embarrassed when he found the long-sought idol of his great soul lying in his arms, with her beautiful, curly, disheveled hair hanging over her bare shoulders, and he apologized in the most affable manner possible for the position and inopportune condition in which he found her. She said, "Where am I?" "Here, safe and sound, in the hands of a most skillful physician, my darling," cried the father. Victor Juno bowed his head gracefully in acknowledging of this compliment, and said, "It is a joy to serve my fellows, and more particularly when danger threatens the pure and innocent angels of our souls. With your permission, fair lady, I will now leave you for a few minutes, and go to my home and send my coach to convey you to comfortable quarters." End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2, of the Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 2, The Solemn Oath of the Conspirators. In the year 18-something, there arose in the city of Philadelphia a monstrous agitation and strife among the religious classes, in which war to the hilt was carried on for 10 or 12 months. But finally the money power conquered, the orthodox classes having possession of the filthy lucre. In sooth, the same selfish and bigoted spirit that makes people orthodox makes them also penurious. Because there is neither progression nor generosity in orthodoxy, therefore these kind of people believe in hoarding up and retaining their hoardings, whether in stereotyped religious rites or lucre. Whilst, on the other hand, the progressive and generous thinkers do not place so much value in religious ordinances nor in lucre, hence become poorer in purse and selfishness, but richer in mind and spirit. The leaders of a similar bloody conspiracy that is now breeding consist of 3 persons: Rob Stew, John Peer, and Nancy Clover. Rob Stew is a man of robust build, with a smooth tongue whose eye can sparkle like an angel's when endeavoring to dupe anyone, but flash fire and fury when cornered or disappointed. He is what the New Testament would call a Judas Iscariot, a viper, scribe, hypocrite, and Pharisee. A man who can dissemble and adapt himself to any kind of villainy, who goes about praying and exhorting, claiming to be a chosen vessel of the Lord. A domineering and self-righteous saint, whose exterior humility deceives thousands, and when one listens to his public prayers and exhortations, he feels as though Brother Stew really was a holy saint without blemish. It is probably this power to dissemble that deceives almost everyone who comes within reach of his influence, that gives him an immense sovereignty over the people. Nearly everyone who knows him or knows of him believes Deacon Stew to be a perfect saint, who could not be guilty of any evil act. But as we pass on, it will be shown that he has 2 sides, one of which is well hid under a smooth exterior. Joe Peer is a very finely organized man of medium size, who is the beloved of the fair sex, a minister of the gospel who presides over the former, Deacon Stew, but who is nevertheless the submissive tool of Rob Stew. Reverend Joe Peer has many refined, tender, and noble feelings, but being one of those milk-and-water creatures who has no mind of his own, nor enough talent to succeed in life without someone to keep him stiff in the backbone, he is just the miserable though useful instrument in the hands of a Judas, like Deacon Rob Stew, to aid in proselytizing millions to the faith of blue-stocking orthodoxy. Nancy Clover is a finely formed female of profound talent and wheedling capacity. She has the faculty of love and power immensely developed, in addition to a mountain of self-deceit, which makes her bold and dauntless. Moreover, she possesses almost a talismanic power to make everyone fall in love with her, whether man or woman, and she always plays upon the lute-strings of affection of those whom she wishes to control, before she attempts to use her love of power over them. Reverend Joe Peer deems her to be a goddess, and even old Deacon Stew is under her gigantic influence. Still, the latter often combats vehemently with Sister Clover, and whilst the charming sister permits the saintly Judas to frequently digress from the even path of orthodox piety, she nevertheless frequently, in secret, admonishes him until he feels ashamed of himself, and Sister Clover well knows that this is the only way to hold the old deacon in her power. For it must be evident to anyone, if you will be made to respect a person, you must look up to such a one, and Nancy Clover fully understands human nature, and also knows how to torture and hold in subjection everyone she takes a mind to wheedle. The leading conspirators, in company with a few of the faithful, are now in private conclave, plotting the destruction of Victor Juno's influence with General Washington Armington, the millionaire and father of Miss Lucinda Armington, or, if it be necessary, to murder him privately. At any rate, he must cease the agitation of his melodramatic reform, or the orthodox doctrines will lose prestige with the people. They met in Tabernacle Hall on a rainy night, Reverend Joe Pier in the chair. After the meeting was called to order, Deacon Rob Stew said, "Mr. President, I have a very important matter to lay before you this evening, which requires immediate action without fear or favor, and I hope that the Brotherhood is ready to use any means to accomplish what I shall have to propose. Should there be any chicken-hearted brothers or sisters present, I move that they be expelled, or swear renewed allegiance to the form of our beloved cause." Here he was interrupted by a surly fellow, who disputed the deacon's right to be so rigorous and mighty as to demand the expulsion of any member of our cause for the purpose of consummating any of his cherished secret plots, which evidently had a close connection with the love-scrape he had with Miss Armington. "Stop, Mr. Grumbler!" ejaculated Deacon Stew. "You are a suspicious and faithless fool, who is not to be trusted with any important work of our cause. I move, Mr. President, I say emphatically, Mr. President, that Brother Grumbler shall at once leave the room, or, if he go not voluntarily, then he shall be expelled by force." "I will leave this matter to the majority of the Friends," said the President. Nancy Clover rose to the floor and said, "Brothers, I am grieved at your silly conduct. Are we not a unit? Does not a house divided against itself fall, and shall we quarrel amongst ourselves whilst a dangerous enemy is entering into our family, who, if his course is not summarily checked, will destroy our influence and beloved cause entirely? I repeat, brothers, as you love one another and our common and holy cause, cease these worthless bickerings and remain a unit, remembering that he who holds out to the end shall be saved." This lofty speech of so good, pure, and faithful a disciple as the beautiful sister had a tranquilizing effect, and the whole membership became a unit. "As each member is ready to act his part in the contemplated plot of our worthy deacon, I now call for the question and plans of Deacon Stew," said the President. The deacon arose and spoke as follows. "Beloved saints, our cause is just and holy. Moreover, as we are the elect and chosen vessels of the Creator, it behooves us to use any means to keep innovators and reprobates away from our path. First, we shall use moderate but effectual means. If, however, they fail, or if we even entertain a doubt of failure, we shall, secondly, drive the bullet or dagger to the inner recesses of the heart of the defiler of the Brotherhood. There is a man in our midst who has always held sentiments antagonistic to and dangerously at variance with our common and holy cause, who has gained great influence in the family of our most heroic and wealthy co-laborer, I mean the family of General Armington. This innovator, by some act of his, has obtained access to the heart and home of the General, and aims to obtain the hand of Miss Lucinda Armington, which, should he be successful, would ruin our peace, comfort, and safety in all time to come. I am informed that this vile innovator is a very magnificent-looking young man, who can proclaim with a Demosthenic tongue and charm even the most devoted disciple of our faith. In sooth, he has already turned the heads of our staunch Armington family, therefore we are compelled to work very cunningly and deeply, keeping our noble and heroic general in the dark until we contrive some mighty plan for the certain ruination of this Victor Juno, a romantic name for the intended husband of Miss Armington. By the heaven above me, and I invoke the powers that be to aid me, I'll trap him, and make him rue the hour that sent him to set his foot in my path. Brothers and sisters, do you comprehend our condition, and do you swear renewed allegiance to our cause and the work I propose? If so, say each one of you, I will, and raise your left hand toward heaven, whilst you place your right hand upon your beating heart, and pronounce the following solemn words after me, repeating each his or her own name. I, Rob Stew, solemnly swear to keep perfectly secret all the plans, acts, and operations of the cause of our sainthood, and should I divulge anything or neglect to do the portion of the work assigned me, I agree to have my upraised left hand burned into cinders, my right hand, which now clasps my beating heart, cut into fragments, and my heart torn out by its roots. Moreover, should I fail to do as before stated, I hope to have my soul cast into outer darkness, where there shall be weeping, wailing, and gnashing of teeth forever, and where the devil and his boon associates shall hiss at me, and pour pestiferous reptiles with envenomed darts upon my sensibilities, lashing and torturing me beyond the expression of language. This do I voluntarily swear, and hope for no other destiny should I fail in the fulfillment of each part of our sacred covenant. So help me God. Brethren and sisters of the sacred tie, you have renewed your vows, and I can now confide my bloody plans to your heads and hands. Therefore, we shall at once dispatch this sacrilegious innovator, whose very name curdles my blood and fits me to such bitter business as would cause the devil to quake. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3 of The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 3. Deacon Stew raves at Lucinda's love for Victor. Victor Juno, after arriving at his home, discovered that his right arm was excruciatingly painful. He dispatched his coach to the spot where the dreadful accident happened to General Washington Armington and his lovely daughter Lucinda, requesting his coachman to serve them to their liking, and telling the latter to make an apology to them for not accompanying the coach, as unavoidable circumstances prevented his attendance at that moment. He sent for a brother physician, who discovered a neglected compound fracture of Victor's arm, which was already swollen to alarming dimensions, and lest he instantly retired to bed, mortification might end his days suddenly. Notwithstanding this most painful condition, which was brought about through the humanitarian act of saving and restoring to life the angelic form of a creature whose very existence was a gigantic balm of Gilead to the lacerated body of our hero, and in a half-delirious state of mind, he felt like leaping mountains to raise prostrate female forms, and to become blessed with hymeneal joys of the most glorious character. But his imagination soon forsook him, and a raging fever, accompanied by the most violent deadly delirium, ensued, which lasted a fortnight. It may be interesting to learn that Victor Juno was a perfectly sound man of magnificently formed dimensions, erect in stature, 6 feet in his stockings, and, in fact, he was almost godlike in every feature. His face was of the Roman cast, with a most happy and indomitably energetic and affectionate disposition. He possessed a full, round, and well-proportioned forehead, with eyes black and like sparkling diamonds, nose, mouth, chin, cheeks, and complexion in the image of God, or after the acme of perfection, the whole central globe of the soul surrounded with Hyperion curls, which hung gracefully over the superbly shaped head, and his trunk and extremities harmonized with these features. Victor Juno had many warm friends, although there were few who dared, in such perilous sectarian times, stand by him openly, which he regretted very much. But yet he was most hopeful of living down all opposition, and conquering every element of strife. However kind, loving, and generous he was toward friend and foe, he possessed the faculty of hardening his manly heart toward everybody if such was necessary to gain a natural end. He reasoned thus: would it profit a man if he gained the whole world and lost his own soul, his own manhood and self-respect? And why should not we be willing to sacrifice the few and the good of the few for the many, and for the improvement of the race of mankind, for the perpetual good of a godlike and fixed law-abiding race? Our hero was truly a man, and we fear we shall not look upon his like again. He loved the sinner, but despised his erroneous ways. He would not prosecute anyone for money and worldly glory, but would slay millions for justice and principle, and he taught as one having authority, and not as the scribes, hypocrites, or Pharisees. The weakest point of his character, to live amongst haughty sinners, was his wonderful benevolence, which caused him to confide too much in what people said. He believed everybody was honest like himself, until he had gone through the fiery ordeal of martyrdom, when he turned his heart into adamant and treated everybody as a viper and hypocrite. But notwithstanding all his doubts and suspicions of adults, he had a never-failing faith in nature and nature's God, and looked always lovingly and confidingly to little children. For, said he often, of such is the kingdom of heaven. This latter quality still proved that the man was a genuine naturalist, who lost nothing by the storms through which he had passed. But yet he lost faith in adults, whilst he continued to cherish the pure and innocent of God's heritage. The family physician of Victor Juno had his doubts about the recovery of our hero, until the second week, when his symptoms seemed to become more favorable. At this time General Armington had learned for the first time that the savior of his daughter's life was lying in a dangerous condition, which was caused by the Herculean and humanitarian efforts the noble Victor made in behalf of the family of the general. When the latter instantly repaired to the home of the delirious man, and asking it as a particular favor to see the hero, was by special favor admitted to his bedside, when, in apparent agony, he was compelled to listen to the recital of the love he bore and pain he underwent for the daughter of General Armington on the occasion of the accident. The general at once desired to render any assistance in his power to alleviate the precarious and painful state of Victor Juno. The nurse thanked the general, but said that his physician did all for him that was possible, and he thought that a change for the better was apparent. At least so said the skillful doctor a few hours previous. The general returned to his home to his daughter, who was also lying on a bed, suffering of severe nervous prostration, and who should be sitting by Miss Lucinda Armington's bedside but Deacon Rob Stew, who did his utmost to exhort and encourage the fair damsel who was the apple of his evil eye. General Armington related all he had seen at Victor Juno's bedside in the hearing of his daughter and Deacon Stew. The latter sat with eyes and mouth wide open, however, with a distressed look on his face, and upon close inspection by an expert it would have shown that a fiendish expression passed spasmodically over his harrowed phiz, whilst he observed with what great interest, grief, and sincere sorrow Miss Armington listened to the story that her father was relating. The deacon saw that betimes Miss Armington was enchanted, especially when the father related what Victor Juno said of his daughter's rescue, whilst, on the other hand, she looked downcast when her father spoke of Victor's dangerous condition. The deacon, Judas-like, hid his feelings thoroughly from the gaze of either the general or his daughter. The latter, however, always felt uncomfortable in the presence of Deacon Stew. In fact, she despised the man, but after all respected him on account of his high position in their church, as also for his religious graces. After carefully listening to the general's recital of what occurred, as well as to the praises which General Armington gave in behalf of the noble Victor Juno, the deacon said in the most solemn manner, General, I am deeply grieved at the sad story of this young physician, as well as being sorrowful to find your noble daughter sick after such a providential escape. It is my heartfelt prayer that all may come right very speedily, and I hope it will." "Thank you," interrupted Miss Armington. "I am sure the excellent young gentleman who has been so brave and unselfish will soon be restored to health, for God would not permit such a noble benefactor to pass away so early, whilst he is capacitated to do mountains of generous acts toward his fellows." "Daughter, I am delighted to hear you express yourself so gratefully and kindly toward this heroic gentleman, for you seldom have anything favorable to say of the male gender," responded General Armington. To these sentiments the deacon ironically replied, "Certainly Miss Armington could not well feel otherwise toward a man who saved her life, for he must be a brave and worthy creature." "Thanks, Deacon Stew," she said. "I am not ungrateful. Moreover, dear father, I feel that we should employ the best medical talent to save Mr. Juno from a tedious and protracted illness." "You are very thoughtful, my darling," responded the parent. "I think the deacon is about the best judge who is skillful in the medical profession. Moreover, Brother Stew, you would be the ablest man to select a good, pious doctor, as I believe greatly in the virtue of grace, which, you know, must be attended with heavenly results." "General, your wisdom and Christian worth and valor charm me, and whilst you were speaking, my mind was directed to a plan, or rather to a very eminent Christian physician, who never fails in the fulfilment of anything he undertakes. That is, if it is in the power of sinful mortal to perform," responded the jealous and hypocritical deacon. End of Chapter 3. Chapter 4. Of the Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 4. Pat O'Connor blarneys the Deacon. Whilst Deacon Rob Stew was conjuring up a lot of shrewd deviltry, and preparing himself to win to his heart the fine Lady Armington, another scene was being enacted in the house of General Washington Armington. Pat O'Connor, a peculiar disciple of the Roman Catholic faith, was conspiring with Judy McCrea, both servants to General Armington, who hated Deacon Rob Stew with a bitter hatred, and their cunning plots to oust his deaconship were novel, and proved equally effectual when the time arrived for the fulfilment of their conniving. As Deacon Stew was preparing to leave the bedside of Miss Lucinda Armington, Judy McCrea was relating to Pat O'Connor what a fancy the deacon had taken to her young lady, stating that Miss Lucinda despised the old hypocrite, when the following dialogue was held between the twain. "Ah, Judy, darlin', and ye mane that dirty old blackguard is in love with the purty Miss Armington?" said Pat O'Connor. "And sure I do," responded Judy McCrea. "Be me soul, I'll trap him, the squally old hypocrite," said Pat. "What will you do to him, darling Pat? Be careful of yourself, for the master believes him to be a perfect saint," replied Judy. "Ah, and ye never mind, but send the old curmudgeon through the side door, when I'll plaster his nest for him. Mark, you keep dark on the matter," said Pat. "I'll do it," responded Judy, and passed toward the bedchamber of Miss Armington. And who should she meet but the General and the Deacon, on their way to the library. They conversed for a moment, when Judy McCrea repaired to the library door and knocked, and upon being asked in, she said that Miss Lucinda desired her father to go to her as soon as possible, when the Deacon was shown out by Judy through the side door, where another hypocrite, the faithful coachman, Pat O'Connor, was busily at work, who placed himself in such a position as to accidentally run against the Deacon whilst the latter turned the corner of the house. Pat knocked the pious Deacon under his chin with the top of his head, sending the lover of Miss Armington reeling like a lightning-struck bull. And no sooner had the Deacon recovered his balance than Pat humbly apologized. "Ah, murder, your honour, and I didn't mane to do it. Will you please to pardon an awkward Irishman? I was a-pulling up a big stone out of the ground when I slipped, and fallen, struck your honour," said Pat. "I will pardon you for what you could not help doing," replied the deacon. "Thanks, many thanks. But, your honour, how have you found Miss Armington?" said Pat. "Very much better, Pat," responded the deacon. "Your honour, please, if you should not consider me impertinent, I could tell you something you ought for to know," said Pat. "Certainly. I would not consider it impertinent for you to tell me what I ought to know, but I would be very grateful to you for telling me, and if it is of any value to me, I would cheerfully compensate you for it," replied the deacon. "Your honour, please do not mention compensation, for I would sarve you cheerfully if I thought you would keep it a secret," said Pat humiliatingly. "Most certainly I shall keep anything secret that you propose to tell me as confidential. But what is it you have to tell me? I am anxious to know it," ejaculated the deacon. "I will tell your honour, if you think it not too bold and foolish, and if your honour would hold it as silly, what I shall tell you, and you'll still keep it secret, will you?" said Pat, looking sheepish. The deacon responded impatiently. "Pat, I have told you before that I would not divulge your secret, so speak it out like a good man, without hesitation." "Well, your honour, I have learned lately that the Miss Lucinda Armington be's desperately in love wid you, and she be's—" "Your honour will keep my secret, will you?" stammered Pat. "Yes, yes, most profoundly secret. Go on and finish what you have to say," almost furiously ejaculated Deacon Stew. "On me soul, you will keep your own counsel on this matter?" mumbled Pat. "Patrick, you insult me by your prevarication. Speak straight out, and don't be silly," said the deacon. "I will, your honour. And do you think it, Miss Armington be's in great distress because you do not ax her to marry you?" said Pat. "I am confounded with delight," meditated the deacon, and continued aloud. "Pat, how do you know all this? Who told you?" "Ah, and don't me darling Judy McCrae tell me all about it. Yes, and what's more, the old gentleman wants his daughter to set her cap for that Mr. Juno chap, what has saved me young lady when me horses run away wid me and almost killed us all. Now, your honour, that young man be's a great man in the eyes of the Gineral," said Pat. "Curse that Juno," meditated the deacon, and mildly asked Pat, "Do you think Miss Armington loves Mr. Juno?" "Well, your honour, you must know that she love your honour. But then she be a faithful daughter, and should the General persist in the encouragement of Mr. Juno, she might turn her affections from ye to him," said Pat. The deacon was almost frantic with delight about Miss Armington loving him at last, but again he was in agony about the General being favourable to this infernal Victor Juno. In sooth, the Irishman's conjuring proved effectual in creating in the deacon renewed ambition to gain the hand of Miss Armington, whilst his determination to destroy Victor Juno was becoming more desperate. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5 of the Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 5. The Bloody Conspirators Poison Victor Juno. We shall now be necessitated to go back to Tabernacle Hall on the rainy night where the bloody conspirators were laying their first plans to destroy Victor Juno's influence with General Washington Armington and family. It will be remembered that Deacon Rob Stew, Reverend Joe Pier, and Nancy Clover were the leaders of the sectarian ring, who had sufficient influence, cunning, and craft to wield whatever power they saw fit to exercise over the orthodox religious classes of all denominations. For it must be again remembered that although sectarian denominations seem to hate each other, nevertheless, when any innovator attacks one sect, or part of a sect, or its tenets, they are all a unit to subdue and quiet the aggressor. Deacon Stew, whose blood had curdled in his veins on account of Victor Juno having gained access and a most dangerous hold upon the affections of General Armington, who already had urged his daughter to receive the attentions of this rude innovator, and as the deacon was himself convinced, from what he saw with his own eyes at the bedside of Miss Lucinda Armington, when her father related what he had seen at Mr. Juno's house, called for vigorous action, therefore, proposed that one of the most trustworthy physicians belonging to the cause be apprised of the necessity to attend instantly at Tabernacle Hall, to receive instructions to attend this Mr. Juno in consultation with the family physician of Mr. Juno, at the request of General Washington Armington and his amiable daughter Lucinda. The President, Reverend Joe Pier, said, "Beloved Saints, we certainly have arduous duties to perform, and they are of such a character as to cause me to tremble in my boots, unless the most zealous followers of the craft are selected to enact the work now in contemplation. I should be happy to hear the plan of operation laid before this meeting by Deacon Stew, whilst Mr. Grumbler will be dispatched to summon either Dr. Toy Pancy or Dr. Lewis Williams to come with him instantly to this hall." Deacon Stew took the floor and said, "It gives me much joy to be able to propose an effectual plan for the speedy and safe removal of that enemy to God's elect. I have been chosen by General Armington to select a physician for this man Juno, and if we can induce, with perfect safety, either of the physicians whom our worthy President just sent for, to slyly administer some fatal drug to this great admirer of the heathendom, I am convinced that our task will be easy, sure, and sound. Whilst the brother physicist is in consultation with Mr. Juno's family doctor, we must evince a monstrous anxiety to restore the sick man speedily, and propose that if his prayers and attentions will do anything towards saving him, nothing shall lack on his part to accomplish the work of convalescence. Moreover, the entire religious brotherhood, sisters included, should be exhorted to pray for the restoration of the worthy hero who saved the lives of General Armington and daughter. And the members shall be solicited to call upon Mr. Juno continually, and be thankful to God that this noble youth had the courage to save the beloved brother Armington and daughter, whilst, of course, they will lament his sickness that was caused by this generous act of Victor Juno. Beloved Saints, it is always wise and better to pray much, long, and often in public, as it shuts up the eyes completely of many worldlings, and, in fact, make some or most of our own members and other Christians more respectful to and confiding in us." Sister Nancy Clover rose and spoke as follows. "The noble and indomitable Brother Rob Stew has given us all that could be desired, even from an angel. Therefore I rise to say amen to it all, and may the power that always shields the elect stand by and see this holy work speedily executed." A knock at the door interrupted the sister, and upon opening it, Mr. Grumbler and Dr. Toy Pancy stood ready to walk in and take seats. The President said, "Brother Pancy, we are delighted to see you with us upon such short notice." "At your service, brethren," responded the doctor. "What is your pleasure?" "Dear Doctor, we have a most important little job for you, which requires perfect secrecy and great shrewdness. Our worthy President has selected you as the most trustworthy and able physician of the Brotherhood to do what has been planned by us," said Deacon Stew. "Brethren, I am highly complimented, and I assure our most excellent President that I appreciate his confidence, which he has so liberally placed in the skill and trustworthiness of my humble self, and I assure him that, if it is in my power, I shall perform whatever task is assigned me. So help me God," responded Dr. T. Pancy. "May the blessing of heaven continually abide with so faithful a disciple," said the President, and continued, "Deacon Stew will give you your instructions privately, and should you refuse to comply, after listening to the requirements demanded of you, I shall be happy to learn your objections, and whether you accept it or not, you are sworn to secrecy until death." "Certainly, Your Reverence," said the doctor. "Deacon Stew will now conduct the doctor into the anteroom and explain his work," commanded the pious Reverend and President Joe Pier. The deacon related to Dr. Pancy what the reader already knows, only he exaggerated everything, and got the doctor to swear particular allegiance to him in this work of deviltry. Fearing that he probably might need him to dose Miss Lucinda Armington for the purpose of bringing her to terms of connubial submission should any part of his program fail. The doctor seemed to be highly pleased with all that the deacon proposed, and showed himself as one of the most ambitious disciples of the elect to purge the brotherhood of all innovators, because allopathic physicians are hand in glove with orthodox saints. The doctor was conducted by the deacon to General Armington's house, but was told that the latter must be in total ignorance of the plans in consideration. The general received him kindly, and at once offered to conduct him to Victor Juno's residence and bedside, whilst Deacon Rob Stew was to summon Victor's family doctor to meet him forthwith. A consultation was soon held, when Dr. Toy Pancy solicited to be ordered by the family physician to remain that night with the sick man, as the latter must be worn out. For this great kindness the family doctor was truly grateful. However, he deemed his patient much better now, being conscious of all that transpired, yet Victor was very feeble and dangerously ill. Dr. Toy Pancy returned to his own office and prepared a slow poison, which he took with him in the evening for the purpose of administering portions of it to Victor Juno during the night. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6 of The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 6. The Serpent at Lucinda's Bedside. Miss Lucinda Armington was a beautiful young lady of medium size. She had heavenly blue eyes, a brow like an angel, and altogether the face of a seraph. Her form was slender, but magnificently cut, a bust of wonderful symmetry, and beautiful arms and hands. Her hair chestnut brown and beautifully curly, whilst her disposition was that of benevolent and frank character, which would curl or entwine itself around everyone, of either sex, who came in contact with the fair damsel. She loved the beautiful in nature, and adored gentlemen who were governed by principle instead of policy. In other words, she was the facsimile of Victor Juno in sentiment and spirit. After she had learned of the deep interest that Victor Juno took in her, his unselfish acts in rescuing her and her father, and when she knew that he suffered so excruciatingly on her account, she seemed to get well almost at once. She said to her father, a few days after his recital of the condition in which he found the young hero, "Father, why should not I be equally brave and determined to save Victor Juno's life as he was to save mine?" "My darling, I should be pleased to see you use every effort to do so," responded the father. The day that General Armington accompanied Dr. Toy Pancy to Victor Juno's house, Deacon Rob Stew, after sending his servant for Victor's family doctor, went to visit Miss Lucinda Armington, and said, "Miss Lucinda, I hope you are pleased with my selection of a physician for your courageous young savior, Mr. Juno." Almost sneeringly and savagely he uttered these words, which caused Miss Armington to start and ejaculate, "Deacon, I am very much indebted to you for going to so much trouble. Had I known that it would have inconvenienced you so much, I should not have spoken of a physician in your presence as I did. Then father would not have thought of burdening you to select an eminent doctor." "My dear Miss Lucinda, you do not understand me. I have not said, nor felt, it was the least trouble to serve you or this young gentleman. But when I spoke, an idea, not pleasing, concerning another matter entirely, flashed through my mind, which caused me to express myself a little emphatic, which I humbly pray you to pardon. For you must be aware that we are all sinners. But thank God that His grace is abundant toward His elect," humbly responded Deacon Rob Stew. "Your apology is accepted, and I am glad that I have not asked too much of you. But when I come to think, It was not my intention to have you select a physician, but it was Father's doings, who has such unfeigned confidence in your worth and goodness," said Miss Armington. "I appreciate this compliment, and shall endeavor to merit it if God is willing," replied the deacon. After exchanging many words with Miss Lucinda, the overrated deacon departed, but accidentally met Pat O'Connor again, just as he was leaving the piazza, when the deacon said, "Pat, how do you find things today? Have you heard anything lately of this Mr. Juno?" "Surely your honour must know more than I does of what am going on in this house, or at Mr. Juno's place. You're a cunning gentleman. Bejabbers, you make hay, I believe, while the sun shines. "Will your honour have the graciousness to keep my secret away from Miss Armington?" said Pat. "Pat, never fear me, but to convince you of my trustworthiness, I will tell you a great secret, if you promise to hold it sacred and will serve me," replied the deacon. "Ah, murder, your honour, don't be a placing me on a quality wid your holy self. I am only a poor working Irishman. Howsoever, I can keep secrets, I warrant you, and if I can sarve you, we'll do it without thanks," said Pat. "I believe you, Pat, and as you confided in me without solicitation on my part, I will now return the compliment, and tell you that I hate that Victor Juno. He is a heathen, a heretic, and an impudent innovator. And although, good Pat, you and I do not agree in religion exactly, yet we are Christians, whom this Mr. Juno tries to undermine and ruin by his worldly notions. Therefore, Pat, will you help us to put him where he belongs?" questioned Deacon Rob Stew. "Well, your honour, I bees at your service to do anything that bees not too indacent, but I am a-thinking where this Juno chap belongs. Will your honour please tell me?" said Pat. "Why, sir, he belongs to the ground from whence he came, and I have a plan at work that will place him forever beyond stepping into my, or your path," ejaculated the deacon in reckless anger. "Ach, holy Moses," meditated Pat, "I smell a mighty big rat, or I'm no man," and said, "Your honour knows what's best, and I will be sacred and sarve you in any manner. But here comes Judy McCrae, so good day to your honour." "Judy, darlin', and I have a secret to confide to your bosom, could I but fail certain that me darlin' could keep a dreadful secret," said Pat. "Why, Pat, you spakes like a crazy man. Do you think I've become a traitress and a vagabond, and have you lost faith in your Judy?" angrily said Judy. "No, me darlin', be my soul, you are accusing me wrongly. Howsoever, I have a monstrous secret to tell you, and if you promise to keep it good, I will give it you, and I want you to help me worry the matter out," said Pat. "And sure I'll do it all as you please, dear Pat," responded Judy. "Open your eyes then, Judy darlin', and listen. Do you know that old hypocrite Deacon Stew be's meaning harm to the brave young lord Victor Juno?" said Pat. "You do not mean that," replied Judy. "Mane it, begorra, I knows it. But I'll fix the dirty old blackguard, or I'm no man. Judy darlin', will you help me to watch the squally curmudgeon?" said Pat. "Certainly I will," responded Judy. "A blazing idea strikes me mind, and that be's we must tell Miss Armington of the attempt this Deacon be's making to murder Victor Juno," said Pat. "Murder Juno?" ejaculated Judy. "Yes, bloody murder, just now a-breeding." "You get Miss Armington to consult wid you and me, and do it quick," said Pat, as though new danger fired up his soul. Judy McCrae was a faithful nurse, who would have willingly lost her own life for her mistress, and she was already aware that Miss Lucinda Armington loved Victor Juno. Therefore she hurried to find her ladyship, to bring her to Pat O'Connor, for the purpose of giving her the news. Miss Armington said, "Judy, what does Pat want with me?" "Och, my sweet lady, and he has a parcel to tell you what will make your blood freeze," nervously replied Judy. "Tell me, what does he mean?" said Miss Armington. "Indeed, and I couldn't tell you, because I do not know much about it," responded Judy. "Well, Judy, "I'll go with you in a moment to hear what Pat has to say," said Miss Armington. They passed out together to consult Pat, who bowed profoundly to Miss Armington and said, "Do the lady desire to learn of the diviltry that am a hatchin'?" "Yes, Pat, I am curious to know the news," replied Miss Armington. "Your ladyship," said Pat, after suspiciously looking all around, "I could not tell you here, but let us go to some sacred place, when I'll teach you a wonder." "Come then, let us go into the library," responded Miss Armington. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7 of The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 7. Nancy Clover, failing to captivate General Armington, becomes revengeful. Sister Nancy Clover is a deep maiden lady, who speaks seldom unless she sees a sure chance to make an impression in her own behalf. General Washington Armington is the idol of her soul, and although the general is not a marrying man, being a widower of nearly 50 summers, she has had a hope of capturing him without much trouble. The general has always treated her with more than ordinary respect, probably on account of her zeal in the work of Christianity. But he himself was no hypocrite, but a sincere believer in and follower of orthodox religious creeds. General Armington was a liberal Orthodox saint, who looked upon every religious sect with charity, love, and respect. In fact, it made little or no difference to him whether a man was a Presbyterian, Methodist, or Catholic. So long as he had faith in Jesus Christ and led a good, moral life, he esteemed such a one as his brother. Nancy Clover understood the views of the general thoroughly, and, as she was very conceited and delighted in controlling everyone, thought that it would be an easy task to bring him to terms after a seasonable time had passed after the death of his wife. But Nancy found that she was shamefully mistaken. Therefore, her love of power was aroused to its highest bend, and she determined to conquer or die. She meditated as follows: "I have done everything in my power for the last 2 years to get General Armington to propose to me. I have courted the society of his hateful daughter Lucinda. I have endeavored to make him jealous of others, after he paid me more than ordinary attentions, but all failed to cause the least impression on his mind. Now I see but one effectual way of bringing him to my feet. I must cause the ruination of his daughter's reputation, and whilst I will link her fall with this innovator, Victor Juno, I will kill 2 birds with 1 stone, by causing a widespread prejudice amongst the saints of all denominations against both of them, and at the same time I will prove the most sympathetic bosom friend of both the general and his despicable daughter. This may seem to be serving God and Satan, but as long as the elect cannot sin, and as long as I can wheedle the entire brotherhood, I am safe. Truly, my unsuspicious and innocent general, I'll turn your head around this way, and you shall see the hypocrisy of others, whilst you will be hated and suspected by many saints, who, however, for your money and position's sake, will do you homage. Yet I will prove to be your only reliable friend. And when your family troubles bow your head, and those in whom you most trusted have proved false to your knowledge, I still will show my fidelity to yourself and daughter. But beware when the tigress once has the opportunity to close her teeth upon her prey, how she will make the huntsman who fails to respect her life howl." At this moment someone gently knocked at the door, and on opening it, one of the servants announced that Reverend Joe Pier was in the parlor, desiring to see her. "What does he want?" asked Nancy. "I cannot say, my lady," responded the servant. "Tell him I'll be there in a few moments," said Nancy, and murmured to herself, "That stupid mushhead is continually boring me. I wish Satan had him, the poor lovesick fool. If ever anything can disgust one, it is to have a saphead like Joe Pier trotting after one, for whom one has neither love, fear, nor respect. Well, well, he may be of some valuable service to me, and I shall take advantage of this visit and use him to accomplish my purposes, if it kills him. The silly dunce seems to be happy when I give him one kind look. But, after all, I pity him, because he loves me as I have loved General Washington Armington. But, do to him what I would, he could never have enough wit, courage, and spirit to revenge himself on me. Thus we are alike in loving what we cannot get, but unlike in revenging our wrongs. I will conquer or revenge myself, whilst poor Joe will fail to conquer me, and, instead of revenging himself on me, undoubtedly will conclude, parson and hypocrite-like, that it was the will of the Lord. After all, I despise these mush and milk saints, who possess neither manliness nor valor. But I must go to Cozy and smile around my dupe. He may become tired waiting. Sister Nancy Clover now entered her parlor, where the Reverend Joe Pier meditated over the future, when he should possess this richly adorned establishment, with the jewel of a woman as its presiding genius. "Good morning, Brother Pier. You are an early disciple of the Lord. I hope I have not kept you waiting. I was just completing my devotions and heavenly meditations when the servant informed me of your presence," said Nancy Clover. "My dear sister, you have always been a pattern of sainthood, and I often think what a glorious world this would be if we had more sisters like your noble self," responded the Reverend Joe Pier. "Thanks, Brother Pier, for the compliment, but I assure you that I always seek to do my duty as an humble follower of the lowly Redeemer," ejaculated the influential and revengeful Nancy Clover. "By the way of changing our conversation, may I ask, what is your opinion of General Washington Armington as regards the fancy he has taken to Victor Juno? Do you not fear that the General will be carried away from the faithful if that innovator is allowed to get well and continue to hold converse with the generous and unsuspecting General?" said Joe Pier. "Indeed, Brother Pier, my peace of mind has been much exercised about this matter, and I fear and tremble when I think of the abyss over which our beloved and truly pious General is inclining. We must exhort all the religious denominations to unite in carrying out some of my plans, which I shall ask you to weave into your sermons, as well as go amongst the members personally and exhort them of the danger that is brooding," said Nancy Clover, with a double meaning. "Oh, angel sister, you do me so much good by your deep and holy thoughts. Will you please give me your plans of operation?" responded Joe Pier. "Certainly, with pleasure, dear brother. But listen, someone is ringing the bell," said Nancy Clover when a messenger arrived from General Armington. End of Chapter 7.
Chapter 8 of the Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 8. Lucinda in Disguise Saves Victor's Life. In the library of General Washington Armington, Pat O'Connor was relating to Miss Lucinda Armington, in the presence of Judy McCrea, what he had learned from Deacon Rob Stew about putting Victor Juno where he belongs, namely, to the ground. Pat continued to relate what the reader already knows, and added his own conclusions and plans. Said he, "Miss Armington, after having your promise to keep this entire matter sacred, and also your promise to relate to Mr. Juno the danger what threatens him, with his promise to keep it secret, I'll just unhitch me soul of the burden of me heart," said Pat O'Connor. "Well, go on, Pat, and let me hear it," responded Miss Armington. "Milady, ye know ye and your father asked Dacent Stew to get a doctor for to trate Mr. Juno, and I had my ideas rubbed up that this Dacent Stew what loves your lady and hates Mr. Juno, because ye love or respect Mr. Juno more than he likes to see. I mean that Dacent Stew has played ye and your father false by getting a tricky doctor what will poison Mr. Juno. said Pat, with great agitation. "Oh, Pat, you surely cannot think that of Deacon Rob Stew. He is a good Christian, and would not do such a foul act as to employ a murdering physician," ejaculated Miss Armington, with an internal shudder. "By my soul, Miss Armington, may I stop to believe my own senses if it ain't the truth," said Pat, earnestly. "But, Pat, how do you suspect or know all these things?" responded Miss Armington. "Good lady, only keep secret, and I'll tell you. That day when Deacon Rob Stew was at your bedside, when ye asked your father to employ a doctor for Mr. Juno, I told Judy McCrea, who told me something about him what strengthened me suspicions, that I wanted her to send Deacon Rob Stew out by the side door, when I runned accidentally against his honour, which made him speak to me. I humbly apologized, and asked him about Victor Juno in a manner what made him believe I hated Mr. Juno, when the old curmudge beg your pardon for forgetting myself," stammered Pat, when Miss Armington interruptingly said, "Go on." "Well, your ladyship, I was a going to say, Deacon Stew spake confidence to me, and said, Pat, if I could trust ye, I have a job that would make you rich. I suspected this deviltry when I blarneyed him, and what you think, he unbosomed the dirtiest plans of his hypocritical heart to meself, and I thought, bejabbers, Pat, here be's a way to larn sacrets that will be of sarvice to me lovely mistress, when I swore, wid one eye shut and a mental reserves, to lead him into the field of battle. He told me enough to conclude that he meant to poison Mr. Juno, and me plans air that ye secretly go to Mr. Juno's house and keep an eye on that doctor chap," said Pat. "Oh, Pat, how can I believe or do all this?" gloomily responded Miss Armington. "Be me soul, I've told ye only what am good truth. Ye can ax Judy McCrea here, what can tell ye I'm speaking only the truth," ejaculated Pat. "Faith, me sweet lady, Pat O'Connor spake the holy truth so far as I knows," responded Judy. Miss Armington was in great distress, and soliloquized as follows, after she excused herself, and was left alone for prayerful meditation. "O Lord, what shall I do? I cannot let father know of this conspiracy to murder Victor Juno, nor can I allow them to poison him, since I can save him. How shall I manage this matter? Oh, how must I act? Great powers above, guide my distressed soul aright. I have it! I have it! I will go in disguise to the house of Victor Juno, and request to see him as an old aunt of his. I understand he has an only relative, and that is an elderly aunt. I'll personate her to the people in his home, and when I once reach his bedside, I'll manage to make him understand me. This will be his salvation, although it may prove my ruination." Miss Lucinda Armington waited until about 7 o'clock in the evening, when she dressed herself in some of her mother's old clothes, which she had preserved from her death, and quietly left by the side door, thinking that she would not be seen so readily by leaving the house by that direction. It must be remembered that this was the door through which Deacon Rob Stew mostly visited the house of General Armington. She made her way to Victor Juno's residence, and as she rang the door-bell, Dr. Toy Pancy drove up, and also stepped upon the step, waiting for the door to open. Presently a very polite male servant received them, the doctor passing to the patient's room direct, whilst Miss Armington, in her disguise, was politely invited into the handsome parlour, which embarrassed her very much, causing a singular shudder to come over her system. The waiter noticed that the lady was somewhat nervous, hence he did not speak for a moment, when Miss Lucinda Armington said, "Mr. Victor Juno lives here, does he not?" "Yes, ma'am, at your service," responded the servant. "Will you have the kindness to inform him that his aunt desires to see him?" said Miss Armington. "Yes, ma'am, but he is very ill. However, he may desire to see his aunt. I'll go to him," responded the servant. Miss Armington now had a flash of horror fly across her mind, thinking, "Oh, gracious heaven! Should I be detected? Monstrous! Should this servant know the real aunt, and go to Victor Juno, or Dr. Toy Pancy, and announce the fact that a lady is in the parlour who says she is Victor Juno's aunt, but that she is not the aunt that he knows, when Victor probably might be strong enough to state that he has only one aunt, or something to that effect. My, oh my head! I think I had better leave at once, because should Dr. Toy Pancy find out who I was, or even suspicion of a mysterious person being in the parlour, he would be on the alert, and hence my mission be a failure, and most likely father, Deacon Stew, and all the rest would discover that something was not right. Never was I in such misery, never was I so undecided what I had better do, and should any one come to me now, my face would be a mirror wherein guilt and confusion could be plainly seen. I must compose myself. Hark! I hear a step." The door opened, and the same polite servant returned, saying that Mr. Juno would see her in a few moments; moreover, that the housekeeper would come to the parlour in a few minutes. She begged of the servant not to send any one to her, as she would patiently wait until Victor was ready to have him, this servant, conduct her to his side. When Victor Juno heard the announcement that his aunt was in the parlour, his countenance brightened up, and he solicited the doctor to permit his aunt to sit by him this night, and hinted he had better leave, which he did, although reluctantly. The servant then conducted Miss Lucinda Armington, the bogus aunt, to Victor Juno's bedside. End of chapter 8. Chapter 9 of the Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 9. Victor and Lucinda Betrothed. When Miss Lucinda Armington presented herself at the bedside of Victor Juno, he seemed to have known what was coming. He therefore spoke first, and said, "I feel as though an angel from on high, in disguise, was sent before me," and took both her hands into his transparent ones, when she replied, "Mr. Juno, I hope you will pardon me for appearing before you in this peculiar manner." "Certainly, my brave young lady. I feel from my inmost soul that you are here on a mission of mercy. And if it were possible, I would relate to you what I saw in a dream last night," said Victor, with a deep and exhausted sigh. "Mr. Juno, please do not exhaust yourself. But if you are not too weak, I will relate to you why I came here, and in this disguise," responded Miss Armington. "Speak, oh speak, sweet lady. Your presence electrifies and strengthens me, and I am quite well enough to listen to anything that your charming voice may relate," quite vigorously said Victor Juno. "Friend Juno, beg your pardon, Mr. Juno," stammered Miss Armington. "Dear angel, use the former, and believe me that my very soul is yours, and I feel assured that by your presence this hour, and in this disguise, that your heart beats in unison with mine, or you would not be thus," most affectionately spoke Victor Juno, looking worlds of love into her soul-enchanting eyes. "May you never doubt my sincerity and motives, but still I am almost a perfect stranger to you," ejaculated Lucinda. But Victor interrupted her, and said solemnly, "My beloved lady, why should you feel in the least embarrassed or backward in the presence of a man who would lose his life 10,000 times to give you one meagre joy?" "Speak no more, dear friend. You have indeed saved my miserable life, at triple the danger of losing your own. Therefore I would indeed be an ingrate to withhold anything from you," modestly responded Lucinda. "Thanks, many thanks, for this delicious candour. And will you now be kind enough to relate what you spoke of? And after doing so I will tell you my dream," said Victor. "Oh, I have some horrible things to tell you, which may not be any benefit to your shattered nerves, but there is a greater danger overhanging you than my story can produce, should you be kept in ignorance of what I know. You will therefore find that my presence at this hour, and in this awkward disguise, may save your precious life, which, if such will be the case, will at least repay you for the great services you have done me and my father," said Lucinda. "Beloved angel of my soul, why do you mention what I did? You certainly cannot deem me so selfish as to hope I labored for compensation," sadly responded Victor. "Oh no, certainly not. I did not mean that, but," hesitatingly she continued, "I suppose it was—" "Love," ejaculated Victor, "that prompted the wholesome act. Say so, sweetest lady, and I'll believe you." "Yes, sir, indeed it was," she said, softly but earnestly. "My soul is rejoiced that my never-ceasing affection for you is reciprocated, if I may be so bold as to esteem myself so blessed," responded Victor. Lucinda modestly bowed her head, and said, "This, truly, is the happiest moment of my life." Instantly Victor drew her toward him and kissed her affectionately, after which he said, "My darling, I should be pleased now to listen to the horrible things of which you spoke." "I will tell you, but hope you will see the necessity of keeping the whole matter a sacred secret, otherwise ruination might befall us both," said she. "No, darling, have more faith in my Cupid God, but let me not interrupt you any more," responded Victor. "Well, my noble friend, you will see the good of being cautious about making known my visit, disguise, and story," said Lucinda. "Of course, sweet love, I shall be perfectly silent, especially as you desire it, even if I saw it was better to make it public," ejaculated Victor. "Thanks, blessed Victor. But to the point. I have a faithful servant at home who has overheard a secret plot to murder you, and that by people whom you have never injured, and of whom you would not think that they could be guilty of such dark deeds," said Lucinda. Victor interrupted her and said, "My darling, allow me to ask who these parties are, and whether your servant really is reliable." "Yes, good Victor, my servant is reliable. Moreover, there are a train of circumstances of which I know, that convince me of the existence of such a plot; and further, when I tell you all, you may be able to conjure up some matters that happened in this chamber, by which you also will know the truth of what I shall relate. My father is a good, honest man, and a great admirer of yourself. I make this remark because when I tell you my story you might conceive the matter in such a manner as to cause an impression on your mind that dear father had something to do with this vile work, because you certainly must know that Dr. Toy Pancy was employed by father and myself," said Lucinda. "What say you? Dr. Toy Pancy?" ejaculated Victor. "Yes, Dr. Toy Pancy is a villain, who has evidently been trying to poison you whilst he was sitting up with you at night, without your own family doctor knowing anything about it," said Lucinda. "Indeed," muttered Victor, and meditated a moment, then said, "I can now know why he was so uneasy and anxious to be alone with me. Surely my dream was not all a dream. But then I have again interrupted you before you have finished your story. Please go on and tell me all." "I will, dear Victor, but you may not clearly understand why myself and father would send you such a villain of a physician, unless I explain to you how he happened to be selected. I myself first proposed to furnish you with additional medical aid, and my father and Deacon Rob Stew sat by my bedside when I asked father to employ a doctor for you. At once father said to the deacon that he, the latter, was best acquainted with physicians, and would ask it as a special favour if Deacon Stew would select a physician. The deacon did so, and this is the manner in which Dr. Toy Pancy came to your bedside," said Lucinda. "But, my beloved angel, how could such a course cause Dr. Toy Pancy to have designs upon my life?" exclaimed Victor. "You may deem me immodest, but, nevertheless, as we have become so well acquainted, and love each other, I may tell you that Deacon Rob Stew has been suing for my hand the last year. But I hate his advances, and have always rejected him, yet have never been rude to him, because I always esteemed him a good Christian, until I learned that he connived with Pat O'Connor, our coachman, to murder you. Pat, Irish like, suspicioned this wolf in sheep's clothing, when he dissembled and acted as though he also hated you, knowing that the deacon detested you because you are his successful rival," said Lucinda. "Is it possible that Dr. Toy Pancy and Deacon Rob Stew attempted to take my life? Surely, I will remember that I had grown weaker the few days that Dr. Pancy was by my side, and my family doctor remarked several times, in the presence of Dr. Toy Pancy, that he could not clearly comprehend why I should not get stronger instead of weaker. My arm is nearly well, and I seem to see it all now. And it is you, my most precious darling, who saved my life. But now I'll have an eye on those vile conspirators, and I see the necessity of secrecy, as you asked it," responded Victor. "Dear Victor, I am exceedingly happy to see you so much better, and able to protect yourself against the danger which threatened your precious life. But please tell me your dream, when I must go home," said Lucinda. "Well, I dreamt 3 or 4 times last night you were by my bedside, as you are, and that we had pledged our mutual vows of love. But every time that we wanted to consummate our nuptial ties, some obstacles were thrown into our path by deep designing enemies. This was all I remember of it, but oh, the horror and despair that I felt was almost unendurable!" exclaimed Victor. "It was of course only a dream, yet a very peculiar one, to say the least, "And I shall be in continual dread of these men, who certainly have commenced in earnest," said Lucinda, when a knock at the door interrupted their conversation; and when Miss Armington opened the door, the servant stood trembling and stammering. "Oh, good lady, the house is surrounded by an army of men." Chapter 10 of the Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 10. Foul Conniving of the Bloody Conspirators. The bloody conspirators have met again at Tabernacle Hall. Reverend Joe Pier in the chair. Nancy Clover took the floor and said, "Brothers, as no one but the faithful and elite are present, and as it will benefit you all to know my plans, which, when you are acquainted with them, may open the door to some new operations." The president ejaculated, "Dear sister, I have been almost dying to learn your plans and operation as you proposed them the last time we met, when General Washington Armington's messenger interrupted us." "Mr. President, I have a word to say which will aid a speedy conclusion of plans," exclaimed Deacon Rob Stew. "Brother Stew, our noble sister Nancy Clover has the right to the floor," interrupted the president and Reverend Joe Pier. "Pardon me, dear sister, I did not intend to be rude, but thought if I could hint it to you ere you speak that I discovered Miss Lucinda Armington leave the General's, her father's house in disguise last night to go to Victor Juno's residence, you would be better prepared to draw your plans up in speedy order," said Deacon Rob Stew. "Thanks, valiant Brother Stew, you verily have done me a service, and as I am now prepared to give you my plans and operations for consummating this holy work of purging our cause of all unfaithful members, apostates, and innovators, you will remember that we have one common interest, and if we cannot gain our individual points, we nevertheless are a perfect unit in obtaining our combined ends. I find that several of those whom we love and respect are being led astray, and would rather play falsely toward us than adhere to the principles we espouse. Firstly, then, General Washington Armington is in dangerous hands while surrounded by this Mr. Juno. Therefore we must devote time, money, muscle, and brains to break the link that binds the General and this Juno together. The best plan is to cause a sanctimonious anxiety for the General amongst all religious people. That done, then our united attention must be earnestly exercised to ruin the reputation, in the General's mind, of Victor Juno, who has escaped us, and is now beyond reach of the plan that was laid for his death through the faithful brother Dr. Toy Pancy. Secondly, we must generate a hue and cry that Miss Lucinda Armington has compromised her reputation by injudicious familiarities, having in disguise and at an improper hour visited Mr. Juno's residence. Thirdly, that having failed in our first attempt to forever quiet Victor Juno, we must now work more amongst the masses of saints of all colours than aim directly at the life of this vile innovator, and by setting up a howl amongst the brethren, setting forth the great danger to our cause, provided this man Juno is not quieted or degraded. This our next best step. What thinks Brother Stew?" said Nancy Clover, whose words sank deep into the hearts of all present. Deacon Rob Stew now arose and spoke as follows: "Beloved saints, I have listened with great interest to our valued sister's glorious plans of operations, and have come to the conclusion what she does not know is not worth knowing. Let us therefore act upon her plans, and to do so effectually, each one must be assigned his or her portion of the work. Otherwise we might cause the chains to clank to our disadvantage, by drawing attention to matters with the same persons, and thereby cause suspicions. I mean that each one shall know in what field he is to operate, because we shall have to influence the Standard Medical Fraternity, the Editorial Fraternity, the Municipal Ring, the moral, literary, charitable, and religious organizations, such as the Young Men's Christian Associations, Sabbath Schools, Bible Societies, Tract, and the numerous charitable societies. And I propose the following order of work for our members: Reverend Joe Pier among the Editorial and Municipal Rings, Dr. Toy Pancy among the Standard Medical Fraternity and Druggists, Sister Nancy Clover among the charitable and literary associations, and I will take to the tract, Bible, Sabbath schools, and Young Men's Christian associations. I would also here relate what I did last night, after I learned that Miss Lucinda Armington repaired in disguise to Victor Juno's residence. I called 20 of the faithful to disguise themselves and join me to surround the house of Victor Juno, and getting Dr. Toy Pancy to arrive also at such a moment as to force his way accidentally into Mr. Juno's house, and go directly to his bedroom for the purpose of detecting whether this reputed aunt who visited her nephew, Mr. Juno, last night was not the veritable disguised Lucinda Armington. I concluded, should we find her there, we would abduct her and take good care that the wretched apostate would never more come between us and our enemy, but from some cause or other we missed our prey. You were not very sharp, said Nancy Clover. Well, as bad luck would have it, they were apprised by Mr. Juno's servant that we were surrounding the house, before Dr. Toy Pancy could enter the house, which evidently caused Miss Armington to escape. But how she got through our lines as we besieged the house is miraculous, responded Deacon Stew. How do you know that she escaped? Why may she not have been hid away somewhere about the immense mansion of Mr. Juno? Did you search the house? Said the president, Reverend Joe Pier. No, sir, we did not search the house at all, but when I found that Dr. Toy Pancy failed to find her, or the bogus aunt, I drew my comrades aside and directed them to scatter a little, until I would go to visit General Washington Armington's residence, and announce to the general and daughter the precarious condition in which Mr. Victor Juno was found when Dr. Toy Pancy returned to his bedside. And behold, her ladyship, Miss Lucinda Armington, was aroused from her own bed as though nothing had happened. This caused us to disband for the present, exclaimed Deacon Stew. The reader will remember that Miss Lucinda Armington was by Victor's bedside the moment Dr. Toy Pancy entered the front door, but she at once ran downstairs and out at the back door before the disguised conspirators dreamt that their presence was detected, and before they had taken their proper stations as besiegers, she had fled. Victor Juno, although not a dissembler, for the lady's sake at once feigned to be awfully ill, and called for Dr. Toy Pancy and his family physician. Dr. Toy Pancy was told by Victor Juno's civil servant that something very horrible was breeding around this neighborhood. End of chapter 10.
Chapter 11 of The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Phil Chenevert. The Social War of 1900, or The Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 11. Shrewd Expose of Cosmopolitan Rascality. The work of sanctimonious deviltry, as well as the melodramatic acting, was now about being commenced on both sides, and as Victor Juno was about restored to comparatively good health, sent his agents to lease the Philadelphia Walnut Street Theater for Sunday evening preaching, which aroused the bloody conspirators to renew efforts to conquer him by either disgracing or killing him. Victor Juno advertised in all the daily, weekly, and Sunday newspapers that he should preach next Sunday evening in the Walnut Street Theater on the rock upon which the church split, in which he should advocate the running of the streetcars in Philadelphia on Sunday. This announcement was hailed by the great majority of the people with delight, which was proved by the immense crowd of the elite and humble that filled the theater from pit to dome, whilst from 5,000 to 10,000 ladies and gentlemen could not gain admission. This popularity was excruciatingly nauseating to the bloody conspirators, as well as distasteful to the more generous and sincere religionists. However, the latter would not have thought of interfering or menacing Victor Juno, although violently opposed to having the streetcars running on their holy Sabbath, had not the bloody conspirators thrown firebrands amongst the denominational cliques, who were thereby persuaded almost to a man that there was violent danger in the atmosphere, or the good Reverend Joe Pier, Deacon Rob Stew, Nancy Clover and company should not have warned the believers. There were now various elements at work. The sincere but misled followers of the flock were in wonderful earnestness. The medical clique also were so bitter that their sincerity to destroy the influence of, or Mr. Juno himself, could not be doubted. The editorial staff laid back until they could learn who would win, for they cared not a whit for either party, on account of principle or love for their hobbies, as they styled their causes. But they were after the filthy lucre and high positions among men, whilst the worldlings rather relished the battle that was breeding in the air. The latter are always in the majority, and they are also ever ready to investigate anything that is not too indecent or inconsistent. Still, they are not a class, under existing morbid civilized life, to be relied upon for succor, because, having been misled and humbugged from infancy to old age by the professed saints, medical lights, political honorables, and lucre-grubbing editorial cliques, as a natural consequence, are equally suspicious of innovators. Moreover, the people, not being educated in sound human science, do very little or no thinking from duty upon the fixed laws of nature and nature's God, hence are naturally suspicious, irreverent, and recklessly impious. Therefore, reformers always labor under very unfavorable circumstances, which is the reason that all genuine reformers are only appreciated many years after they have gone beyond this shoal of tears. The staunch and sincere followers of the sectarian churches are afraid of reformers. The standard medical profession is too dignified and learned in potions and fine classic terms to be annoyed by rude naturalists, or less scientific charlatans. The bloody conspirators, claiming to possess ownership by might if not by right of everything, entwine themselves around the hearts of the unsuspecting and innocent, whilst they swear allegiance to orthodoxy in medicine and religion, and bitterly detest innovators. The newspaper fraternity and municipal rings neither fear nor hate orthodoxy or liberalists, provided the pile of stamps is balanced. But when the precious jingling stuff inclines one way, then they behold more respectability, decency, and godliness on that side of the house. With the foregoing illustration of the position of Victor Juno, the reader may be able to realize the unenviable state of a heroic reformer. But the power of the bona fide natural Christian or normal man is immense over the weak minds of a sickly nation, as will be seen by the way Victor Hugo holds the entire community uneasy, causing thousands to quake in their boots. He takes his enemies by storm, and rends asunder the sophistries of century-born customs, which shakes the foundations of falsely erected houses, until amazement stultifies the human mind. End of chapter 11.
Chapter 12 of the Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 12. Victor Juno's Scathing Sermon in the Theatre. Note: the reader must peruse each of Victor Juno's discourses, or he cannot understand the plot. Beloved friends, I will speak to you this evening on "The Rock upon which the Church split." I have nothing new to offer, but as Shakespeare says, "Old things wax new when lovers grow cold," and I argue that the love for a natural Creator, who has made everything for our pleasure, joy, and perpetual bliss, has grown very cold. In sooth, God and nature are esteemed vulgar monitors, if we accept the actions of the professed saints as criterions to go by. The Old and New Testaments teach sound logic, when we have the key to unlock the meaning of the mandates of this Bible. It is very much a book like the arithmetic, and as long as it is read by everybody, without anybody having the key by which alone a natural or scientific religion can be discovered, the Church of God, which is composed of all the wonderful works and fixed laws of God, will be continually split into new isms and schisms, and each stupid sect, in error bound, think they the only road have found to paradise complete. There exists only one Church, namely, the Holy Catholic or Universal or Natural Church of God, and Jesus Christ was the naturalist who established it. There are no such things in God's or Christ's or nature's vocabulary as churches. Moreover, a church is not a house made of bricks, mortar, wood, and cushioned seats, with gilded candlesticks and gaudy or plain features, blasphemously dedicated to Almighty God, as commonly called, by the Pharisees and blind leaders of the blind. But a church, or the church, is composed of law, order, principle, heavens, earth, air, and all the multitudinous little injunctions of the Creator, with Jesus Christ's simple, pure, and resolute mind at the head, representing himself as the chief cornerstone, whilst the Holy Spirit is the motive power that incites the mind to a full understanding and bona fide appreciation of the Creator's fixed laws. Hence, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit are in one work, or are actually one, and yet three distinct heads or principles. Therefore, the Church cannot be dedicated by man who is born and bred in false relations to life. It is the height of presumption to talk such stuff, but man can dedicate, or consecrate, or devote himself to the Church, if he chooses to repent of his bad habits, and is willing to seek and find wisdom inside of God's fixed laws of life and health, both of body and soul. Knowing, therefore, what the Church of God is, we can soon behold what split this hallowed natural institution, namely, reading the Bible without first understanding the science of human life or laws of nature, hence not being able to cipher out the meaning of God and nature. One must understand the multiplication table before he can use the arithmetic to advantage. So also one must comprehend a true anatomy and physiology before he can understand that the Bible and fixed laws of nature and nature's God agree. Beloved friends, having given you the key to the Bible, namely, a knowledge of the science of life, and having shown that God's kingdom suffers violence through ignorance of his fixed laws of life, therefore this ignorance is the rock upon which the Church split. Let me reiterate that the bigoted sectarian and partisan spirit is given preeminence over God and nature. God makes the beautiful natural country, but sinful man makes the city. The latter is composed of the abuse of the Creator's goodness, is a heap of brick and mortar, like the sectarian brick and mortar churches, but has no keen conception of Christ-like sympathy for the poor, the fallen, and the leprous. No, those who should be cared for, who should be raised, healed, and saved, are made the tools and serfs of the lucre kings, who, Pharisee-like, can ride to their gilded brick-and-mortar churches, or anywhere else, in handsome coaches on Sunday. But the poor laborer, who is the bone and sinew of the city, is not allowed to have his carriage run through the streets of this immense city on the only day of rest. I say the street cars shall be made to run on Sunday in this great heap of brick and mortar. Friends of free, noble America, are you going to allow the meanest monarchy on earth to rob you of your inalienable rights? I mean the sectarian money monarchy. Are you going to stand by, rubbing your bloodshot eyes, and blaming God for the miseries and serfdom you suffer, whilst cunning, craft, hypocrisy, and the most cruel deceptions are continually practiced upon you by these false interpreters of the Bible, who would have you dance to their fiddle or see you suffer the veriest slavery, but withal howl of freedom and American liberty. Why, my dear friends, there are leaders at the head of these misled enthusiasts who would enter into any foul conspiracies for the purpose of gaining their pharisaical ends. The bloodiest conspirators of all ages are at the helm of this sanctimonious work of deviltry. They crucify Christ anew, and connive to slay the faithful follower of truth, because they, claiming to be the chosen people of the Lord, think they own heaven, earth, man, and his liberty to serve God. Was not Jesus Christ arrested on the Sabbath day for doing good, the same as these modern vipers arrest all men who desire to think and act as they deem it right? Did Jesus ever use trickery like this to subjugate sinners? Did he delight in domineering, lucre grubbing, and sanctimony? Nay, nay, but he pronounced the following terrible woes upon such scoundrels. Woe unto you, scribes and Pharisees, hypocrites! For ye devour widows' houses, and for a pretense make long prayer. Therefore ye shall receive the greater damnation. Ye fools and blind guides, who strain at a gnat and swallow a camel. Ye serpents, ye generation of vipers, how can ye escape the damnation of hell? With Jesus Christ, God and nature, I cry aloud and spare not him who sets himself against the fixed laws of an unchangeable Creator, and I exhort and pray you, instead of God, to rise up as one man and slay the hydra-headed monster that would stay the stream of a God-ordained piety. I ask you to lead natural, physiological lives, returning to nature, truth, and sound sense, and unless you fight for principle and justice, you cannot expect salvation. I live to hail that season, by gifted men foretold, when men shall live by reason, and not alone by gold; when man to man united, and every wrong thing righted, the whole world shall be lighted, as Eden was of old. At this moment the meeting was interrupted by dirk knives being thrown from the galleries at Victor Juno, when a terrible riot arose. End of chapter 12. Chapter 13 of the Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The Social War of 1900, or the Conspirators and Lovers, by Simon Landis. Chapter 13. Lucinda abducted and imprisoned. The house of General Washington Armington was besieged by visitors from the sainthood, and although the faithful Pat O'Connor and Judy McCrea were not suspected of either knowing anything of the troubles that were breeding, or of being participants in the diabolical work of overthrowing the sacred temple of the elect, yet, truly, they were in secret conclave with Miss Lucinda Armington, doing bold acts, whilst the sincere and bloody conspirators were trying to inveigle the general into a plot to discard Victor Juno. Deacon Rob Stew said, "General, are you not afraid that your beautiful daughter will get a bad name by associating with Victor Juno? Because, my dear brother, you must know that an immense odium is attached to that man." "I cannot see what he has ever done to cause such gossip about the brave young hero. I certainly admire him very much, and shall stand by him until I learn of acts by him that are unmanly," exclaimed the general. Pat O'Connor has such long ears that he was overhearing this little conversation, and he at once said, "Me lady, that divil of a dacon is putting mischief in your father's head, but I'll stop him straight, if ye want me to do it." "I do, Pat, if you can do so in a judicious and effectual manner," ejaculated Miss Armington. "Bedad, lave that to me, and I'll rattle his mutton for the old hypocrite," said Pat. Pat now hurried to the library, where the general and deacon were secretly conversing, and impatiently knocked at the door, whilst he almost simultaneously cried with a loud voice, Me honoured good mashter, I was told by a gintleman on the street that you were violently callin' and sarchin' for me. Here I be's at your sarvice." General Armington told him to come in, when Pat rattled off a lot of Irish that might have done homage to a king, whilst he bowed profoundly to Deacon Rob Stew and said: "May it plaze your honour if I say to ye that the worthless paple are assaultin' the howly saints. I mane your frinds, way down by Jabob's plantation, and the Riverend Joe Pier and Miss Nancy Clover told me to ax ye, should I see ye, to come home quickly, for they belave a riot am a breaking out." "I'll hasten, General, if you'll excuse me," exclaimed the deacon, frightened lest Victor Juno was arousing the people to do great violence to the believers. "Good mashter, I have somethin' to tell ye, if I tought ye would not tink me too bold," said Pat. "Not at all, Pat, go on and tell me," replied the general, recklessly, with however more than ordinary anxiety. "Wal, ye may not belave me, but sure as life be in me, the dacon, what just lift, is no friend of me Mistress Lucinda. Because I heard him spake to a stranger the other evenin' what was not true nor kind to spake of a nice lady like Mistress Lucinda," said Pat. "What was it, Pat?" demanded General Armington. "And sure, good mashter, he said to the stranger, 'Well, brother, I have discovered that Miss Lucinda Armington is a fast young lady, because she visited Victor Juno in the dark night,'" exclaimed Pat, angrily. "How does it come, Pat, that he would make such a remark in your hearing? He knows that you live with us, and would not utter such words in your presence, fearing you might tell us. Where was this?" indignantly ejaculated General Armington, who thought, "Pat, you are either lying, or the deacon is a hypocrite." "Good mashter, belave me, and he said that very ting. But it was one dark night, whin I heerd many noises along the rood as I was a comin' home from Judy's father's," said Pat without hesitation. "Surely, Pat, I cannot understand this, but I will see by and by what it means," responded General Armington. Pat now sought his Judy and Miss Armington to tell them how he worked the deacon's mutton. He said, "Och, be me howly Moses, but I worked the dacon's mutton. I just made him belave that there's a fight down by Jabob's plantation, atween his howly saints and the worthless paple, and mind ye, he belaved every word of it, and clared right straightway from your noble father, whin I told your good father what will cause him to look to the old curmudge excuse me, I mane hypocrite," jocularly said Pat. "We must be very cautious not to expose our secret workings, or our plans will prove futile, and dear father might then be turned against Victor Juno," sadly responded Miss Armington. "But have ye heard of the riot last Sunday evenin' at the Walnut Street Theatre? The dirty old dacon, I'se sartin, were at it every bit," said Pat. "Oh, yes, I have learned from a friend who was there that these bloodthirsty conspirators had sent some detectives in citizens' clothes, as well as had sprinkled throughout the theatre some of their own disciples, for the especial purpose of breaking the peace, so that the mayor could find a legal cause to arrest Mr. Juno. But they were unable to cause the audience to be clamorous, hence, toward the close of his discourse, several threw dirks from the galleries toward Mr. Juno, which missed him, thank God, but sank deep into the boards of the floor all around him. And as soon as the people saw this outrage, they made for the scoundrels who were seen throwing the knives. The enemies of Mr. Juno were too few to stand a battle, therefore the apparent riot was soon calmed. But the mayor and bloody conspirators were afraid of the people, who were well pleased with Mr. Juno's sermon, otherwise he would have been arrested," said Miss Armington. It was now getting late in the evening, and the general having retired to bed, Miss Lucinda Armington, Pat O'Connor, and Judy McCrea were still talking over these exciting times, because Miss Armington had now no trustworthy friends, amongst all her many elite acquaintances, in whom she dared to trust, only her faithful servants were left her. These humble but cunning Irish lovers grew in Miss Armington's esteem to a wonderful degree of respectability and moral worth, when she compared them to all her pious friends, who were now determined to have her desert Mr. Juno, or they should desert her. However, death would be preferable to unfaithfulness to her betrothed husband. At last the servants also retired to rest, but Miss Lucinda remained in the dining room alone, meditating over what she should or could do to be of service to her beloved Victor. After sitting for an hour in a meditative mood, she thoughtlessly opened a door that led to the fine garden, and whilst thinking only of Victor, she found herself walking under the magnificent trees, which were interwoven with shrubbery, and, oh horror! Suddenly she felt something thrown over her head, which was the last she remembered that night. End of chapter 13.